for joining us. Thank you.
Hello, how are you?
Thank you. Please have a seat. A warm welcome for the senator.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you.
We are so happy to have you. To kick things off with our time with you, 1 of 3 women have been victims of some form of physical violence by an intimate partner within their lifetime. That's all of us in this room and across the country. 1 in 5 women have been raped. And further, each year, thousands of women and girls, particularly Black women and girls, Indigenous and transgender, are kidnapped, trafficked, or murdered. What is your plan, and what would your plan be as president to end gender-based violence?
Well, for a start, we have got to recognize the severity of the program, of the problem, and make sure that this does not continue to exist. All right? And that means, by the way, not only specific plans and programs, it means a fundamental change in the culture of this country. All right? And that means that every woman in a job feels safe in the workplace, feels safe on campus, that anybody who rapes or harasses understand there will be a severe penalty to be paid for that.
We just had the candidate that came on before you talk about the Equal Rights Amendment. Do you believe that, I mean, I think it's about 2 states away from being ratified. Do you believe that, 1 state away from being ratified. Do you believe this country needs a constitutional amendment enshrining the rights of women?
I do. And I think, look, we have had, as a nation, as everybody knows, a troubled history in terms of racism, in terms of sexism, in terms of homophobia, and many other injustices. And I think it is absolutely appropriate to say in the Constitution of the United States that women will be equal to men, end of discussion.
And one quick follow-up, we have some questions to bring out. Can you name a policy of yours, what you would champion as president, that would specifically help women of color?
The answer is absolutely. I mean, and it's not just, Joy, not just one policy. It's a number of policies. It is to say that in the year 2019, the time is very long overdue to end institutional racism in all of its forms all over this country. And what does that mean? It means to say that we will not accept discrimination in the workforce. It means that we will end the absurdity of women in general making 80 cents on the dollar compared to men, and minority women making a whole lot less than that. It means we're going to open the doors of educational opportunity for all people, regardless of income. And one of the issues that I have been very proud of, and 4 years ago, as you will well know, these were not widely popular issues. But you talk about equal opportunity, I said then and I say now, that every person in this country, regardless of color, regardless of income, has the right to get a higher education, because we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, and we are going to very substantially end the burden of outrageous levels of student debt in this country.
We all witnessed the Kavanaugh hearings and ultimately Kavanaugh having a place of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is stacked against women of color, I would say. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has been filling federal judgeships with right-wing, anti-woman of color people. What could you do as president to overcome those obstacles that are being put in place right now for after taking office in 2021?
Well, the first thing is that my pledge to you, and I don't make a whole lot of campaign promises, but that is, as President of the United States, I will appoint Supreme Court justices and nominate justices all across the board who will represent the needs of people of color, of working people, and who are prepared to believe and fight for justice, not just the people on top. So that's number one. Number two, I know there's been a lot of discussion about packing the court and so forth. I'm not for that, because I think the next party that comes to power will do the same thing. But I think what we can do is something fairly novel, is that after a member of the Supreme Court serves for a certain period of time, perhaps 12 years or so, that justice then rotates to an appeals court. That'll give you some fresh blood.
And we know that, this primary has a lot of people in it, but if you look at where you stand right now in the polls, you are in the first, second, or third in most of the polls. You're polling very well in every state. But in order to consolidate the nomination, you have to win over Hillary Clinton voters.
Yeah.
What are you doing to try to win over those voters, which includes a substantial share of the women of color, of the black women who voted in 2016?
All right, let me make good question, and let me answer it. Let me answer it in a couple of ways. First of all, obviously, we are working really hard to win the Democratic nomination, and if I do that, we're going to work really hard to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country. And to your point, the Democratic Party has got to be united, all right? I hope to win the nomination, and I hope to have my fellow candidates, people who are seeking the nomination, many of whom are personal friends, support me if I win. But my pledge to you is, if I do not win, I will do everything that I can to make sure that that Democratic candidate becomes the next president of the United States. This is no time for petty divisiveness. This is a time to stand together in the fight not only to defeat Trump and his racism and his sexism and his homophobia. This is a time for the American people to come together in the fight for economic justice, social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. And that is what this campaign is about.
Yeah. And for black women specifically?
I'm sorry?
For black women specifically?
The black women will be an integral part of what our campaign and what our administration is about.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay? And that means...
Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
Yeah. Were you finished with your? Because
Yeah.
I want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to bring on our audience question.
Yeah.
Please come to the stage.
Thank you for being here, Senator Sanders.
Thank you.
My name is Sayu Bojwani, and I'm the president of New American Leaders, which works to help immigrants ready to lead. And as a woman of color myself, I have dedicated 3 decades to ensuring that people like me feel like we belong and are full citizens of this country. Just last week, the son of a Louisiana sheriff was arrested for allegedly burning down 3 historically black churches in that state. Unfortunately, this is just one of a consistent string of terrorist attacks committed by white men to enact fear on people of color in the United States. What do you believe is the federal government's role to fight against the rise of white nationalism and white terrorist acts, and how do you plan to lead on that in your first year as president?
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, but we have got to make it very clear that the type of demagoguery we are seeing from the Trump administration is not what this country is about. And I will do everything that I can to help lead this country in a direction that ends all forms of discrimination, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, and discrimination based on people's sexual orientation. I am the son of an immigrant, the proud son of an immigrant, and I will do everything that I can to make sure that we pass, finally in this country, comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship, that we provide immediate legal protection to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. So the goal that we have got to establish is to bring our people together around an agenda that speaks to all people. And that means guaranteeing health care to every man, woman, and child as a right, not a privilege. And I'm proud to have led the effort to fight for a Medicare for all single-payer program. It means understanding that when we talk about minority communities, when we raise that federal minimum wage to a living wage of $15 an hour, you're going to do away with a lot of economic stress in this country. So those are some of the things that I think we've got to do.
Let me just follow up, Senator. The core of the question is about, as president, what would you do with the rise of white supremacist violence to protect our communities?
Absolutely. You know, as somebody who, I know I date myself a little bit here, but I actually was at the March on Washington with Dr. King back in 1963. And as somebody who actively supported Jesse Jackson's campaign as one of the few white elected officials to do so in '88, I have dedicated my life to the fight against racism and sexism and discrimination of all forms. And as President of the United States, at the very top of our agenda will be the understanding that discrimination of all forms has got to end, period. And you do that using the bully pulpit, and you use that doing legislation. If somebody wants to go around perpetrating hate crimes, that person will pay a very, very heavy price indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think what the questioner is getting at is a phenomenon that is actually global. We're seeing it throughout Western Europe as well, as influxes of immigrants from the Middle East come in. You're seeing the same kinds of rises of white nationalism.
Well, let me just say a word on that. That's correct.
Yeah. So as president, what would you do to return the U.S. to global leadership on that issue?
Well, you reverse exactly what Trump is doing. Trump is a cowardly, authoritarian president who is he hides the reality that he has tried to throw 30+ million people off health care, give huge tax breaks to billionaires, cut Medicare, cut Medicaid, and education. You can't win an election doing that. So what do? You do what demagogues in Europe and in this country have always done. You scapegoat. You go after immigrants. You go after people of color. You go after minorities. You say those people are the problem. It's not Wall Street. It's not the drug companies. It's not the insurance companies. It is undocumented immigrants. That is demagoguery. You're right. It exists in this country. It exists all over the world. And as President of the United States, our foreign policy will not be, as the current one is, to support authoritarian bigots all over the country. It will be a policy of supporting democracy and human rights.
The women in this room represent 28 states, mostly South and Southwest. In many of these states, women of color, the majority of women, and we're the strongest Democratic vote in the South and Southwest, which is the reason for this forum. In your first 100 days, what would you do as president to indicate and support and center the leadership of women of color, particularly from the states represented in this room?
Well, the first thing I do, and here's my second campaign promise to you, is my administration will look like America. All right? It will be representatives of the people of America. It will be representatives from people who understand the pain and the struggle that working people and minorities are currently feeling. It will not be an administration of wealthy bankers and Wall Street executives, but it will be an administration reflecting all of our people who are prepared to stand up for economic, social, and racial justice.
question that we've been asking each of our candidates who've come out today is that we know that there is a very diverse, very large field running for the Democratic nomination. It includes many diverse candidates, women, people of color. Right. With all of those options on the table, why should women of color, black women, choose you?
I think what I would ask of people, is a couple of things. Look at my record and look at what I have campaigned on. 4 years ago, it was not a popular idea to suggest that health care for all was a right, not a privilege. Today, that concept is seeping through all over this country. 4 years ago, it was not a popular idea to say that we have got to take on a broken, criminal, racist, criminal justice system and bring about real reform which ends the absurdity of the United States having more people in jail than any other country on earth. 4 years ago, I said that we have got to end the war on drugs and legalize marijuana. We have come a long way in 4 years. 4 years ago, when people were kind of laughing at me when they asked me what is the major national security crisis facing America, I said it was climate change, and that we have a moral imperative to transform our energy system. The bottom line is that many of the ideas that I brought forth 4 years ago are now widely accepted by the American people, and Democratic candidates from school board to President of the United States are now supporting them. And when we talk about justice, we are also talking about the massive levels of racial disparities that exist in this country. It's not just that we need health care for all people. We need to address the fact that infant mortality in the African-American community is 2.5 times what it is in the white community. That white families have 10 times the wealth of black families. That in the criminal justice system, African-Americans get arrested far more frequently than whites. So the campaign is about two things. It is suggesting very strongly that we cannot continue a nation when 3 families have more wealth than the bottom half of America, when you have a political system which is corrupt because billionaires are able to buy elections. And then within the midst of all of that income and wealth disparity at a national level, we have racial disparities as well. So our campaign is twofold: taking on the big money interests on Wall Street, the insurance companies, the military-industrial complex, the prison-industrial complex. And if you look at what the mantra of our campaign is, it is us, not me. Because I understand that I believe this very strongly, that no president, not the best intentioned, not the most honest, can do it alone. If you want to transform America, you want health care for all, you want real criminal justice reform, you want to deal with climate change, you're going to have to take on together, we're going to have to take on incredibly powerful institutions that have unlimited sums of money. So my campaign is about not just winning the nomination, not just defeating Trump. It is the understanding that we cannot transform this country unless millions of people, black and white and Latino, Asian American, Native American, stand up and take on the very powerful, greedy special interests who dominate the economic and political life of this country.
Ladies, Senator Bernie Sanders, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well.